A tiny island in the Pacific holds a city built from 750,000 tons of stone. It sits on a lagoon, not on land. Nearly 100 artificial islets, stitched together by canals, rise straight out of shallow reef water. No cars, no roads, no nearby quarry. Just stone, water, and silence. This is Nan Madol, off the coast of Pohnpei in Micronesia. For centuries, most of the outside world had no idea it existed. Even today, it barely registers outside a small circle of Pacific archaeologists. And once you understand what's actually sitting in that lagoon, that seems impossible. Archaeologists agree on the basics. Construction began around the 12th century. Over time, Nan Madol became the ceremonial and political seat of the Sautelur dynasty, the rulers who unified Pohnpei under a single authority for the first time in the island's history. The city was built almost entirely from columns of black basalt, a volcanic rock that naturally forms in long hexagonal beams when lava cools slowly, almost like something stacked by a giant playing with rock candy. Workers laid these columns in crisscrossing layers, the way you'd stack logs for a fire, to build seawalls, foundation platforms, and royal compounds rising straight up out of the coral reef. Some of these walls still stand today, close to 25 feet high in places. No mortar, no cement, just stone locked against stone by weight and geometry alone. It's a staggering feat of engineering by any standard. So what's the problem? The problem is the weight. Researchers estimate the total mass of basalt used across the entire site at around 750,000 metric tons. Individual columns weigh up to 5 tons apiece, some even heavier, and the nearest known basalt source isn't next door. It's on the opposite side of Pohnpei, roughly 25 miles away by open water. Pohnpei had no wheels, no draft animals capable of hauling that kind of load, no iron or bronze tools. And yet, somehow, over generations, that basalt made its way from quarry on one side of the island, across open coastline, into a lagoon on the other side, where it was lifted, stacked, and locked into place with a level of precision that has outlasted nearly 1,000 years of tropical storms, earthquakes, and rising seas. That's where the official story starts to fall apart. For decades, the working theory was simple. Rafts, log rafts, floated at high tide, dragged by hand or towed with ropes across open water, then guided into the lagoon and unloaded piece by piece. It's plausible. It's also never been proven. No lifting tools built for handling 5-ton stones have ever turned up at the site. No sled tracks. No ramps. Nothing found so far explains how columns weighing more than a small car were raised on a platform several feet above the waterline, over and over, islet after islet, for centuries. Local oral tradition offers a very different answer, and it's one that archaeologists don't dismiss outright. According to Pohnpeian legend, the stones were never carried at all. They were flown, moved through the air by 2 sorcerer brothers using magic, guided by a dragon said to live within the lagoon itself. On its surface, it sounds like pure folklore. But researchers who study oral history across the Pacific have long pointed out that origin stories like this one often encode a real memory, distorted and reshaped across generations, of an engineering method that outsiders simply don't understand yet. Strip away the dragon, and what you're left with is a culture insisting consistently, for hundreds of years, that ordinary methods don't explain what happened here. Picture standing on the reef at Nan Madol 30 generations ago. The salt columns stacked 5, 6, 7 layers high around you, catching the late afternoon light. No mortar holding any of it together. Just weight, friction, and geometry, precise enough that entire sections still stand nearly vertical after 1,000 years of typhoons and slowly rising seas. How do you plan something like that without writing any of it down? Because that's the other piece of this mystery. The Sautelur dynasty that built Nan Madol left no known written records. There are no inscriptions describing construction methods, no ledgers tracking labor, no diagrams of how a 5-ton column gets from a quarry to a platform floating on a reef. Everything we know about why the city was built and how its society was organized around it comes almost entirely from oral tradition passed down long after fact, and from modern archaeological surveys, using tools the original builders never had access to, like ground-penetrating radar and underwater mapping of the surrounding canal systems. A survey conducted at the site within the last 2 decades used radiocarbon dating on organic material trapped between layers of basalt to refine the construction timeline. That study helped confirm the 12th century start date with more confidence than earlier estimates. But it didn't answer the transport question. It couldn't. The stone itself doesn't record how it got there, only roughly when it arrived. Some researchers argue the true answer is more mundane than magic, but arguably just as remarkable. They suggest the builders used the tide itself as a tool, lashing columns to bamboo or wooden rafts at high water, floating them into rough position, then letting the tide drop to lower the stone gently into place, repeating that process thousands upon thousands of times across multiple generations of builders. It's an elegant idea. It would help explain why no lifting equipment has ever been recovered. But it still doesn't fully explain how columns were moved 25 miles across open, often rough coastline before they ever reached the calm lagoon waters, or how workers achieved the tight, interlocking precision visible in the surviving walls without a single piece of iron or bronze. Not everyone agrees on how long this actually took, either. Some estimates put the total construction timeline at well over 400 years, which means the workers who broke ground on the earliest platforms never lived to see the finished city. Entire generations were born, worked, and died within a construction project that outlasted their individual lifespans by centuries. The reasoning behind specific design choices, why certain islets were reserved strictly for burial, why others held royal residences, why the canals were cut exactly where they were, may have been decided by rulers whose intentions were simply never written down anywhere that survived to reach us. There's another layer to this that rarely makes it into the popular retellings. Nan Madol wasn't a single monument. It was a sprawling administrative capital, with distinct islets functioning as mortuary temples, royal residences, food preparation areas, and spaces reserved for specific priestly rituals. Researchers mapping the site have identified nearly 100 separate artificial islets, each apparently built for a distinct social function, which means whoever planned the city wasn't simply stacking stone for the sake of spectacle. They were executing a citywide plan, coordinating labor, materials, and design across dozens of separate structures over centuries without a single written blueprint that has ever been found. That kind of sustained, multi-generational coordination, without written records to pass instructions forward, is arguably just as hard to explain as the stone transport itself. There's a deeper question sitting underneath all of this. Nan Madol wasn't built in secret. It wasn't hidden deep in a jungle or buried beneath centuries of sediment. It sat in open water, fully visible, for hundreds of years, functioning as the ceremonial and political heart of an entire island's power structure. And then, sometime after European contact and the eventual decline of the Sauteleur dynasty, it was abandoned. The population that had once maintained the seawalls and canals dispersed elsewhere on Pohnpei. The precise knowledge of exactly how the city was built simply wasn't preserved in any written form, or if it was preserved, it survived only in a form, like the story of the two sorcerer brothers, that modern researchers still haven't fully managed to decode. Today, rising sea levels are quietly finishing what 1,000 years of typhoons never fully managed. Sections of the outer seawalls are eroding faster than they can be documented. Some of the lower islets are slowly sinking back beneath the lagoon that has surrounded them for nearly a millennium. UNESCO listed Nan Madol as a World Heritage Site the moment it was inscribed, largely because of exactly this kind of environmental threat, which means a window to study what remains, to understand how a Pacific Island society without metal tools, without the wheel, and without a written language moved 750,000 tons of stone across open water and into a lagoon, may be closing faster than anyone studying the site expected even a decade ago. A tiny island in the Pacific holds a city built from 750,000 tons of stone. It's still there for now, sitting quietly in its lagoon, stone stacked on stone, exactly the way it was left. And after everything we now know about who built it, when they started, and how long it took, the question that opened this story is still the one nobody has ever fully answered. How did they actually move it?